In the past few weeks, Extinction Rebellion and its various offshoots have been disrupting major sporting events. About a week ago, we had the Grand National was disturbed by Animal Rising, this animal rights offshoot of Extinction Rebellion. The World Snooker Championship was quite severely disrupted by someone throwing orange powder all over themselves, a Just Stop Oil activist. And now we're expecting the London Marathon to be targeted. That's where all our eyes are. Now, strangely, Extinction Rebellion have said that they're not going to do anything. They've even agreed that they will guard the marathon to stop other eco-activists from interfering because they are big fans of running. It seems
very green mode of transport.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, Tom, what do you make of this? Surely they're eager to spoil our fun.
Well, that's the thing. It has become a very kind of explicitly anti-fun agenda in recent weeks, targeting, as you say, kind of beloved national sports and pastimes with quite comical results, particularly with the Just Stop Oil stunt at the Crucible. As you say, there's this interesting schism, I suppose, which has emerged between Extinction Rebellion, the kind of mothership of all of these different organisations, and Just Stop Oil, which seems to be at least presenting itself as the sort of more disruptive, radical end of it.
Yeah.
Animal Rising used to be Animal Rebellion. They dropped the Rising because they don't want to be associated with Extinction Rebellion. So you're kind of seeing a bit of a People's Front of Judea kind of thing started to kick off amongst the environmentalists. So much
MLK versus Malcolm X.
I think that would flatter Roger Howland more than is necessary. But it's fascinating. I mean, it does show the kind of killjoy instincts of this. And it's one of those things where, you know, especially after the Grand National, you had Animal Rising saying this was about the safety of the animals and so on. It reminded me of that old quote about Puritans that they wanted to get rid of bear baiting, not because it gave pain to the bear, but it gave pleasure to the crowd. There's a kind of similar sort of thing happening here, where not content with just making people's day-to-day lives a misery by blocking roads and so on, they want to get and meddle your pastimes as well. So the kind of killjoyism of it, I think, has been much more pronounced in the past week or so.
Yeah, someone somewhere might be enjoying themselves, so we've got to put a stop to it. Luke, I mean, the consistent line from these groups has been, well, you know, that thing, who cares about the snooker? The world's going to end. Why are you watching that? Look at this. I mean, it's bollocks, isn't it?
Well, the first thing that struck me is, I forget, I did look up the snooker protester's name, but I think he is... It's sort of laughably posh name.
It's Edred Whittingham.
There we are. Yeah, so I knew
straight out of a Brideshead novel or something.
Add that to Indigo Rumbelow.
I mean, he's the son of a venture capitalist.
Yes, so son of a venture capitalist disrupting what, you know, the snooker, which is traditionally a working class pastime. I mean, I think that the reason why these demonstrations are so controversial is that they clearly risk alienating the precise people they need to be winning over. What has snooker got to do with oil? You know, it just doesn't, for most people, and the reaction at the snooker was obviously unanimous anger and annoyance. And it is important to emphasize that people might have saved up quite a lot of money to go and see the snooker. That would have meant the end of that game, play suspended. For the players, it would have meant that any progress in that game was lost. You know, there is just a complete disregard for people's interests in these demonstrations. And it just seems like the worst way to win an argument you can imagine.
And in terms of the kind of legal ramifications, I mean, there's lots of discussion around the public order bill, a bill that seems pretty much designed to counter explicitly XR and its offshoots, insulate Britain in particular, one we haven't mentioned. They seem to have gone a bit quiet. You know, how should we be dealing with these protests? I mean, it's not simply a straightforward question of free speech, is it? If they're disrupting people's lives, they're not just making their point.
I think there's a couple of things we've got to kind of break up here, because on the one hand, the right to protest is not an indivisible liberty. There is obviously points at which it encroaches on others, encroaches on property, people's ability to go about their daily lives and so on. And I think a lot of people are quite struck by the fact that it's so difficult to say clear people out the middle of the road and so on. You know, I don't think that strikes people as a particularly onerous restriction on the right to protest, just out of nowhere blocking streets en masse and so on. The problem is that the government's response to it has been genuinely draconian.
Yeah.
So we've had the public order bill most recently specifically trying to criminalised with pretty hefty punishments, things like locking on to things. Less controversial, these, I think they're called serious disruption prevention orders, a very kind of ASBO era style kind of measure, stopping someone from associating with a certain group of people in a certain place, carrying certain items. I think the government even wants it to apply to people who don't have any criminal record and so on. So these are the sorts of things which are quite concerning. It comes off the back, this is where things get a bit confusing, I guess, of the policing bill, the Police Crime Sentencing Court Now Act, which introduced all of those restrictions that many people have read about in the press around one-person protests, noise restrictions. For protests is too noisy. That's apparently a problem. And yet it seems to me and to many people that either the power should already exist to deal with these people, or they should be, if there are any loopholes which are obviously being exploited and which are posing not only a problem for people going about their lives, but a safety issue in many cases in terms of some of the actions that were taken, then that should be sort of discreetly dealt with. But that's not really what we've had. We've had a kind of overreaction, an attempt to kind of posture as being against these crusty, loony left characters, which is a comfortable position for the Tory party to be in. But it has come at the cost of protest, definitely. I think the problem is, when arguing about this, is the fact that in Extinction Rebellion and in protest movements more broadly in recent years, is that it's an increasingly difficult argument to make, because these protests increasingly take the form of just the kind of whinging and hysteria of the middle classes. A form of political action which was supposed to be about the public, the masses asserting themselves in situations where they weren't being listened to, is basically being taken over by the irked, and in this case apocalyptic middle classes, who don't feel they're being listened to quite enough. And that's a very different kind of proposition that we found ourselves in. That's a shame, and it makes it harder to argue for, but doesn't mean the right to protest should be encroached upon, I don't think.
Yeah, definitely. And Luke, I mean, what do you make of the sort of kid gloves treatment that a lot of the protests have got, not just from police, but also from, judges? There's been a few saying words to the effect of, "You're good people, really, your cause is important," etc., etc.
Yeah, well, this is the irony behind the flurry of legislation that we've had, the kind of flurry of lawmaking around this issue recently, because the problem is not necessarily with the law, it's with the enforcement of the law and the question of how and when that is enforced. And as you mentioned, I think a lot of people's frustration is not that the police don't have the power to move people out of the road, it's that when it comes to it, they're unwilling to do so. We've seen time and time again where demonstrations blocking roads have not been intervened with, and people are wondering why. You mentioned the Extinction Rebellion demonstrators who, when being sentenced, were told by a district judge that they were fundamentally good people, and that, he can support everything that they do. That's what makes this, there's this strange entitlement on behalf of these demonstrators who seem to believe, perhaps justifiably, that they have the machinery of the state kind of at their back, and that they're being facilitated in what they're doing by the fact that the law won't be enforced when push comes to shove. And, I've been reading some Extinction Rebellion commentary and some commentary from Just Stop Oil complaining about the severity of the sentences handed down in some circumstances to particular protesters. And you just sort of think, well, they feel as though they should be able to do whatever they want without any consequence at all. So I think that question needs to be addressed. It needs to be, we can't have a system where there is literally one law for protesters that the state agree with and everyone else. That's not how we do the rule of law.
And Tom, finally, there is something that a lot of people have remarked upon, the fact that they just keep going, even though everyone hates them. I mean, some less than clever people have suggested it's brave to, disrupt the snooker and be booed at. I think
I've seen them likened to the suffragette. I see people likened to the suffragettes.
People have likened to suffragettes.
Yeah, which is pretty incredible.
Yeah, no, obviously I don't agree with that comparison. But do you think there's something almost cult-like about it? The fact that just this total indifference to public opinion, to public opprobrium.
I mean, they are gripped by a very apocalyptic idea, a very kind of millenarian idea. I mean, when people see some of these people resort to these tactics, and I think it was that young woman who got up on the gantries over the M25 and started crying about how she didn't have a future and so on. You see many of these activists, including your man from at the Crucible, talking about he's not going to have children because he can't bring them up in a world of eco-death and so on. Yeah. Fears which are not borne out by even a pretty mainstream reading of the evidence, shall we say, is the fact that they have imbibed a very extreme notion, which is that the world's going to hell in a handcart, that humankind is kind of sinned upon the planet, that we're reaping what we sow. If you look at what particularly like Roger Hallam, who already mentioned, the kind of one of the co-founders of Extinction Rebellion, now the alleged mastermind behind Just Stop Oil, he literally has a video on YouTube addressed to young people, quote, as they face annihilation, in which he describes a future in which marauding rape gangs will go around and poke your eyes out. I mean, this is
cigarettes.
With cigarettes and hot sticks. It's very graphic, you know. But this is the sort of thing which they're being fed. So on the one hand, you think, you know, you can't be surprised that they take this issue so seriously, but it is mad. I think that the concern is, and this goes to Luke's point as well, is the fact that a more diluted version of this is pretty mainstream anyway. And it is the guiding principle of so many policies which are taken, even quite damaging ones. So in Just Stop Oil, you just get the most extreme example, almost taking a mainstream eco austerity doom-laden mindset to its logical conclusion, really. So it's not just about challenging them, it's about challenging the whole edifice, if you like, of all that very anti-human thinking that's been going on for a very long time.